Today we're going to be looking at this SSD, what can do 7,500 megabytes per second on read speed. It's the Lexar NM800Pro, and we're going to find out why it is so pro. Now, looking on the front of the box, it says Lexar Professional NM800Pro, so it's basically saying it's professional twice. The non-professional version also says it's a Lexar Professional, but it just doesn't have Pro after the NM800. So this model comes with a heatsink. It's an M.2 card. It's a 2280 PCIe Gen4x4 NVMe SSD, so obviously make sure you've got a motherboard what will support the SSD running at those speeds, otherwise it will go a lot slower. Otherwise, it says 7,500 megabytes per second. I think that's up from 7,400 on the older model, or should I say the non-pro model, and the one we've got is the 1 terabyte version. On the back of the box, it is multilingual, but generally 99% of the writing on there is that small. You'll need a magnifying glass, or you need to be 12 years old to be able to read it. It does tell you the the read speed on there, but it doesn't tell you the write speed at all on the box, which a lot of manufacturers of SSDs and storage components are guilty of doing, which is a shame because it's as if you're missing half of the needed information off of the box. Okay, let's go through some of the features. So the main features is that it's got a heatsink on there to keep it cool. I think there might be some with or without options on there for the heatsink, and by the looks of it you can remove it if you wanted to as well. It'll work in your PS5, energy efficient like all NVMe drives are. The drive comes in 3 different sizes: 512 gigabyte, 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte. Now the speeds are different depending on the actual drive you go for. So if you went for example, the smaller drive, the 512 gigabyte, the read speed is 7,450 megabytes per second instead of 7,500, and the write speed is only 3,500 megabytes per second. But if you jump up to the 1 terabyte, the read is 7,500 megabytes per second and the write is 6,300 megabytes per second. The 2 terabyte again is 7,500 megabytes per second on the read, and the write is up to 6,500 megabytes per second. Not a huge difference between the 1 and 2 terabyte versions, but if you drop down to the 512 gig, you're not far off half the speed on the write speed, just bear that in mind. For those who need to know what the NAND Flash is, it is 3D TLC NAND Flash in there. Obviously we've got the heatsink to keep it cool and everything like that, and as most people know, the cooler you keep electronics, usually the better it performs. It's shock and vibration resistance with no moving parts, and again generally SSDs are, and it's got a 5-year limited warranty on there as well. Okay, so inside the box all you've got is a plastic insert with the SSD itself, which we'll have a closer look in a few seconds, and a little manual which really is not that needed, and I don't think anyone's ever going to read it anyway. Okay, so let's have a look at the SSD itself. So this is the Pro version. This is the one with the heatsink. They do a version which has got a heat spreader rather than heatsink on top, which is basically like a little plate across the top is probably the best way of doing it, rather than a thick heatsink. So there is that model as well. So the difference between the Pro version and the non-Pro version, or at least in what most people are interested in, is the actual speeds. So the non-Pro version, the read speed is 7,400 megabytes per second compared to 7,500 on this, so a fraction faster. You'd probably not notice it in reality. And on the write speed, you're going from around about 5,400 megabytes up to 6,000, roughly 500, depending on the model you're going for. So there is roughly a 1,000 megabyte read difference on there. So that is nice, getting that little bit extra speed. So it makes it roughly close to 20% faster. You can remove, it looks like there's little screw holes here to remove the actual heatsink if you wanted. So if you wanted to put it in the device like a laptop, which obviously you haven't got room for a heatsink, you can do. You've got your model number and specifications on the back there. When it focuses in, there you go. So you've got all the information you'll need there. Other side is the same, again, screw holes there as well. So it leaves you with a top where you've got that sort of finned style on there. It's got Lexar in the middle. Depending on your PC, you may not even see the SSD, because in most cases, if you put it in the main drive slot, that's under where your graphics card's going to be, which is good that it has got a heatsink on, because sometimes you can have very little airflow underneath there, which can cause it to get hot. Having a heatsink on allows it to dissipate a little bit more heat than if it didn't. Down to testing. We've tested this on a Threadripper machine. It's a 3960X, which is basically 24 core, 64 thread, 64 gig memory, and so forth. It's basically a fast machine, so there's no bottlenecks. And as you can see from our testing here, using Crystal Disk Mark, we got a read speed of 7,479 megabytes, so nearly 7,500, basically what it says on the box. And the write, again, nearly what it says on the box, which is 6,300 megabytes per second. Well, I say on the box, it's actually on the website, but you know what I mean. We did tests using Atto as well. Atto does usually score a little bit lower than Crystal Disk Mark, but even on that, let's put it onto the megabytes. You can see here it was getting roughly just under 7 gigabytes a second, so 7,000 megabytes per second on the read, and on the write you were getting roughly round about just over 6 at places gigabytes per second, so 6,000 megabytes per second. You've got the IOs on there going up to close to around about 90,000 on the read as well, and 84 on the write. We also did a test as well on here using user benchmark, just to give you a rough idea how it performs against other drives. And as you can see, they give it a score of 539%, which is outstanding, and that is actually extremely fast. As it says here, it's performing way better than expected, and it's in the 99th percentile, which basically means it's in the top 1%, so that means it's really good, so you can't get much better than that. Temperature wise, we're getting between 50 and 60 degrees on the drive when it's working under load, which is pretty good. It's got a heatsink. It is hidden slightly underneath the graphics card, so it hasn't got the best airflow, so getting temperatures like that when it's under full load doing these tests, that's pretty good. We couldn't do any real-time testing because we didn't have another drive as fast as this to actually test it with, so the catch was if we did do the testing, it would be on a slower drive, which would then mean we would be getting false results. But it gives you a rough idea, and the machine, or should I say the drive itself, does run better than expected, or what it says on the tin, to be honest. And as you can see in user benchmark, they're saying it's a top 1% drive in the world, so you can't really get much better than that, can you? I hope you enjoyed that video. I know I did. If you would like to see other Lexar videos we've done in the past, then click this box up here. If you'd like to see other SSDs we reviewed, then click this box just down here. Otherwise, give us a thumbs up, like, and so forth. You know the drill, and we'll see you next time.